Hi, this is Eva for Once Upon a Timeline, and today we're going to discuss the very weird fact that there are now at least 10 The Thinker statues done by Rodin and 3 Mona Lisas accepted as done by Leonardo. And this is in addition to my last video where there were 4 the Scream paintings. So it seems like the famous artwork is just replicating itself. It's getting pretty weird. All right, I have also figured out some things about why we have noticed certain changes on the Thinker. So let's get to it. Okay, here is the Thinker. And a lot of people have noticed changes. One of the most obvious ones was that a lot of people remember him having his fist on his forehead. And then later, people remember him having a fist under the chin. And now he has kind of an open fist mashed on his mouth. Another change that people have noticed is that he's got his elbow on the opposite knee now. If you try to replicate that position, it is difficult to do and very uncomfortable. I can't really imagine anybody actually sitting in that position for any length of time, not to mention thinking in that position. Okay, so another change that I personally noticed is that he looks a lot more muscular to me. This image doesn't really show it, but there's a lot of wrinkles around his waist that I don't remember him having. And also his face just looks much more tortured to me. He used to be kind of a peaceful, pensive look. And now he just kind of looks like he's really upset. And also there's this history now of this statue having been originally part of Dante's Gates of Hell presentation, which this image shows. And I don't remember anything about that. I could have just not known, but I think considering the other changes, that also is suspicious. Okay, but one particularly interesting change that a lot of people noticed is they remember the Thinker used to have hair. At least for a while, he had normal hair. I know like a year and a half ago, he had normal hair. And then a couple months ago, people noticed that his head had become kind of smooth. The hair looks kind of blobby, like putty. And there's this weird nub sticking out the side. And nobody could figure what that was. I mean, some people were thinking it was a hat, but then if you really look at it, it's not really a hat. It's just a weird nub of hair-like blob. It's weird. So I didn't know why that was. I didn't understand that change until just recently. So first thing I want to show is, this is kind of weird. I went to Wiki and they have a 3D scan of the Thinker that you can manipulate, which on the surface sounds really convenient, but here is the scan. Now, one thing I noticed right away is you don't really see this nub of hair sticking out. It's not sticking out in this scan. It looks pretty normal. I mean, his hair still looks putty-like and smoothed over, but you don't see that nub. So another thing is these hands here are pretty separated and more relaxed looking. And if you look here, these hands look kind of clenched. So I'm not sure what this is a scan of, but it's not a scan of what we are normally looking at, which I think is kind of suspicious. So anyway, I'm going to just get rid of that scan. I just wanted to show you how weird that one was. All right, so going back to the one that we look at often. Now, this is confusing because apparently the current storyline is that that Rodin made at least 10 of these statues, and that the one that we're familiar with is even like a smaller version. And this is an article by Mental Floss called 12 Things You Didn't Know About the Thinker. And the interesting ones are down here at number 9. You can see the Thinker all over the world. In his lifetime, Rodin made at least 10 castings of the Thinker. All right. Now, how did this happen? I remember there just being one Thinker, but this is the technology innovation made so many castings possible. Doubling the size of the Thinker for its 6-foot versions, known as monumentals, was made much easier by the invention of the Colas machine, invented by its namesake Achille Colas in 1836. This device allows the sculptor to trace their completed plaster cast while a corresponding tool would carve a replicate in clay in the exact measurements required. Okay, so basically they can replicate an original and make it larger or make copies of it. So apparently in current timeline, this is what happened. He made one and then it was replicated. All right, so here's a list of some of the ones that were made. Now, this article here says at least 10 were made by Rodin himself. All right, this one is not really clear about who made what, but you can see there's quite a lot of them. But what's interesting is this one. This is the original, the first one in 1884. And I looked this one up, and it's this one. Now, some people had kind of found this one last time the Emmy came up, that, look, there is the original one had a hat. And you can see there's kind of a nub sticking out here, and there was a hat. Okay, so why did the ones that we're familiar with change? Well, I'm guessing now that it's because of this copy device. If his original one had a hat, and I don't think this original one existed in my timeline, there was only one with hair. But now you have an original one that had a hat, and there's a funky nub sticking out the side here that was part of the hat, and they used the copy machine to make all the others. Then the copy machine is going to make the head smooth, and there'll be a weird nub there. So I think that's why now we see all of the future ones with smooth heads and a nub. Back in the timeline when there was only one The Thinker, it was a better quality one. But now most of the Thinkers that we see are copies of this one that had the hat. So I think that's why we saw that particular change. Now, some of the other changes about him looking all miserable and the fist on the chin, I wonder if the fist on the chin might be due to other anatomy changes. If you put your hand on your forehead now and sit, it's just not as comfortable as I think it might have been in older timelines with older anatomy. So that might be part of that change. Some of the other changes, I don't know the reason behind them, but I think it's interesting that I've discovered the likely reason behind at least this one change. It kind of indicates that there may be reasons behind the other changes, but we just don't know what they are. Okay, so now the second subject material is the Mona Lisa. Now, I remember there only being one Mona Lisa, and certainly we've talked about changes in the Mona Lisa. We've talked about head veils showing up on the Mona Lisa, and if you watch this area back here, the watery and land area behind her changes quite a bit. For a while there was a really freaky bunch of water and a waterfall. Now it's kind of, there's water way up here. Another change that's been her is this scarf thing over the shoulder. And a very recent one is there seems to be more scarf material here. And of course, the famous smile is a lot more smiley now than a lot of us remember. But here's what's weird. Okay, I had heard something about there being a second Mona Lisa found a couple of months ago. So I started looking into it, and I found that there's actually 3 Mona Lisas now supposedly done by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so here's the story. Scholars to unveil a third Mona Lisa in Geneva. You look at the date here, it's 2012, a date that we often see for a lot of this weirdness. So, roughly 500 years after the creation of the Mona Lisa, 2012 has turned out to be quite a big year for earth-shattering news for a painting that many believe to be the world's most famous painting. Earlier this in the year, the art world was shocked by this discovery of a subsequent authentication of a second copy of La Gioconda, which is the other name for the Mona Lisa, found in the basement of Prado Museum. A few months ago, reported that researchers believe they have found the bones of Lisa Gherardini, widely believed to be sitter for the portrait, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so when the Prado Mona Lisa was authenticated, scholars accepted it as there was ample historical evidence that Leonardo painted 2 versions of the masterpiece. If you look into this more, there's some hints that maybe there were 2 Mona Lisas. Now, I never heard of that, and I think that might be a history change. But so apparently, in this timeline, the story is they thought there might be 2 all along. Now, I don't know how one could be hiding in the Prado Museum and nobody noticed that it looks strangely similar to the other one. But somehow that's the storyline here in this timeline. Okay, so for the past 60 years, this is what's weird. There's another Mona Lisa that for apparently 60 years, the second Mona Lisa was believed to be the Ilsworth Mona Lisa. Okay, so what's going on here? This one here is the Ilsworth Mona Lisa, and it's something that somebody had in their collection for a long time that people apparently for 60 years have suspected is the second Mona Lisa that I never heard of. And it's a younger version of Mona Lisa and also believed to be painted by, well, most scholars now say, are painted by Leonardo also. So for 60 years, they thought this was the second Mona Lisa. I never heard of it. But now some people are wondering if this is the second Mona Lisa. And this one also is believed to be, and this was found in the Prado Museum, and this one is also believed to be painted by Leonardo. So now we have basically three Mona Lisas. This one was supposed to be an earlier, younger version of her, and then two versions of the older version. And there's even some yammer that these are so similar that he might have been trying to do a 3D thing with 3D glasses, and then he had 3D glasses, and so you'd put these side by side and then wear your 3D glasses. I know it sounds crazy, but anyways, this is the current timeline. There's now three Mona Lisas painted by Leonardo. So and this is in addition to the the screen paintings that I talked about in my previous video. So I think it's pretty clear that the famous artworks are all replicating themselves, or many of them are, and I think this is a pattern we should watch for in some of the other artworks. If there's any left that haven't already been replicated, we may find that there's some strange story about how there were always multiple of the other artworks as well. So anyway, this is Eva signing off for Once Upon a Timeline.